The day has finally come and Assassin's Creed Mirage is finally out. It's been around 3 years since Valhalla released, and if anyone has watched any of my videos prior to this, you'll know that I was not exactly fond of that game. This is going to be my first thoughts on this game, so don't take this as my final review. That will be coming eventually in December, so if you do want to see a critique-esque style full video essay, which will probably be a very long video going into detail of different parts of it, that'll be out in December, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. This video is also spoiler free, so don't worry, you don't have to worry if you are actually wanting to play the game and being spoiled. The first thing to start off with is going to be what I was expecting when I was walking into this game. For me to explain this, I think I need to quickly go over two things. The first is that I didn't enjoy Valhalla, as I previously mentioned. I found that it moved away from existing lore way too much, and also removed itself from the assassin element of Assassin's Creed as a franchise. The other is that this game was made within Valhalla's engine, which was also initially made as a DLC for that game, and on top of that, it didn't have the full focus of the dev team to make it. So it's not necessarily a game that's been set up entirely for success as a baseline game. However, I'd definitely say that this hasn't entirely missed the mark. So mix that together with what I was basically expecting, with the idea of it being within the modern engine, meaning to be more like the original games but within the Valhalla engine, just at a smaller scale. That's overall what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting it to be anything that superb. However, I would say that this game actually is more similar to Origins than it is Valhalla. Everything about this game screams way more that it's Origins than Valhalla, however it has the UI design of Valhalla. So let's sit down and talk about everything from the performance that I've experienced on my PC through to the black box missions. The first place that I want to start is going to be asking the question of whether or not this actually feels like an old school Assassin's Creed game. I'll also use this to answer a few questions that you guys gave me around this game's release, and I think the biggest one on everyone's mind is that exact thing. Was this like an old school Assassin's Creed game? The honest answer is no. However, I don't think this necessarily means that you won't enjoy the game if you love the old format of Assassin's Creed, which I will explain throughout this video. I think one of the biggest things that makes this game feel like one of the newer games is purely that it's obviously within the same engine and the animation styles aren't exactly personalized to Mirage. So everything just seems very samey to Valhalla, from the animation styles to the way people talk to one another, and because of that, a lot of it kind of lacks emotion. And in terms of performance, the first thing that really struck me was the fact that this game has random stutters. Not FPS drops, just stutters. I tested this out on my PC, which is running a 13900K and a 4080 with 64 gigs of RAM. So before anyone tries to tell me it's your hardware, it definitely isn't. But this game seems to stutter even within cutscenes and as well just generally running around the game. And when running it with Afterburner, and I'm getting anywhere between like 140 to like 250 FPS, it doesn't drop the FPS, and that's where the stutter comes in. It just seems to stutter, and it doesn't drop FPS. So I'm not sure if that's something that's just wrong with the PC variant that will hopefully be patched. That was something that I noticed. Now I do want to spend some time and talk about the gameplay, and to start off with, I'm going to talk about stealth. And to answer the idea of whether or not this game is a stealth game, I would 100% say this game is miles better in stealth than almost any other Assassin's Creed game besides Unity. It feels very similar to Unity in many different aspects, and I think Unity is the pinnacle of Assassin's Creed stealth, parkour, and general, map design, everything about it. I think Unity did most of those things perfectly. It just didn't do the launch of the game with the bugs that great, and the story lacks in the second half. However, within this game, you can definitely tell the actual likeness that this game has to Unity's systems of stealth. You can hide in plain sight, and unlike the RPG games, you can actually approach missions in the same way that you would have actually approached a proper stealth game. So for me, this is definitely a massive leap in the right direction. Another thing that I actually think was a great step in the right direction was the combat. I've seen some people say that they didn't necessarily think this is a good choice, that they dumbed it down. However, I prefer this over the typical hack and slash against a damage sponge enemy that we got within the newer games. We can now parry and insta-kill opponents, which to be honest, I'm happy to see return, as I don't really want to be spending hours of my entire playthrough fighting enemies. I don't really see the point in that when I'm here to do assassination missions and take out targets. We also have throwing knives, which is a nice extra to have in there. It allows you to approach these missions and feel way more like an assassin than we have done in recent memory. One thing that I do want to mention around the combat though is that this game isn't actually the same as the old games in the sense that you can easily just fight off a load of guards by just being patient. Yes, you can to an extent if you get the parries perfectly right every single time. However, I have found myself sometimes missing those parries, which means that you take a lot more damage, and it means that it is really intentional on you having to be stealthy for this game to work. It forces you to be stealthy, which is a great change of pace for an Assassin's Creed title. It's been a really long time since we were actually made to be stealthy. Next up is going to be the graphics, which is probably one of the biggest highlights of Valhalla. I've always said that Valhalla is a beautiful looking game, but I don't really feel like this game necessarily is. I don't know what it is about it. I don't think that it looks awful, I just don't think it looks as good as Valhalla. That might just be because the color palette of Valhalla is so much more richer and has loads more to contrast against, but in this game, it just feels a bit dulled down. And in regards to the characters and the world, I do feel like all of them still have the same issue as all of the RPG games, that they just feel a bit dead behind the eyes, and nothing feels like it has a personality to it. Egypt was decent, but not necessarily amazing. Greece felt like nothing was really going on most of the time, and England was extremely mediocre at best. None of them felt like they actually had character to the worlds you were exploring. When we were roaming around Paris within Unity, it felt like we were actually roaming around revolutionary Paris in a way that nothing has ever encapsulated before. I've spoken about this in my Unity video. I think Paris in that game is one of the best open world cities we've seen. And even to the likes of Florence within AC2, that game feels like it's got more character to its open world than many of these games. The game is visually good looking, but the closer you get to things like the characters' faces, the more they look like wax figures, and they just feel as if, due to the voice acting, eye movement, and lip syncing, that there's no true emotional weight behind what is being said in those moments. And in regards to the world, just to have as a final point, is that I don't necessarily think the world is awful. I think the world is a lot better and better designed generally than most of these games prior. However, I don't think that they necessarily have, gone past the issue of just, I think, what the engine causes, or what their current design philosophy is. I wanted to take a moment and talk about a comment that I received about the story's length. Not the story itself, but the length of the story. Now, what I saw was someone saying that they believed that the 18 to 25 hour story was a regression. It wasn't actually a good thing, which I wholeheartedly disagree with. This game was made to be shorter, and that is 100% for the best. Most people didn't even make it halfway through Valhalla, let alone the fact that you have to play 70 hours of that game to get through the main story, which is full of bloat. This game so far for me hasn't had anywhere near as much bloated content. You even get shown a montage of his training. If that was Valhalla, you would have been made to spend 2 hours running around and getting stuff done. In this, it was a 30-second segment. Personally, I'm a lot happier with this, as I don't want to spend loads of time doing mundane tasks that don't really lead to anything interesting, especially if it's a main story. I don't want to be spending hours in this game world when Assassin's Creed worlds aren't exactly known for having the most deep and livable places to explore. The reason AC2 worked so well is that it didn't take you 60 hours to complete. We have this issue where we seem to conflate length with value being added to the player, when in reality, this is further from the truth. If anything, a lot of games, especially Ubisoft titles, the longer they are, they feel more like they basically had the quote of, how can we make you feel as if you're wasting more of your time away? That's how I felt anyway. Valhalla used the sunk cost fallacy tremendously well to keep people engaged and playing, even though they weren't enjoying themselves. They were solely playing because they had thought at 50 hours in, they've got to be close to the end, and then they make it to 70 hours and realize, okay, yay, I'm now actually finishing this game. I can now move on to the next thing. So for me, I do think that 18 hours is about the perfect length of an Assassin's Creed story. Some of the greatest games ever made only take about 20 hours to complete, with something like The Last of Us taking around 12 to even 15 hours depending on how fast you want to rush it through. Some games' main stories like Red Dead Redemption can take you 32 hours to complete if you're just playing that, and you get way more emotional connection with that game than you would get within any new AC title that has double the length. And then we have the skills and RPG elements. This game 100% still has remnants of the RPG side of the franchise within its baseline systems. Not just in the way that the game feels when you're moving around or the UI. Even though Unity introduced the skill tree systems, I don't think that it was done poorly within that game. Everything just feels like it's lackluster. I never feel like anything really matters. All of the skills seem easily forgettable. Personally, I am a fan of games like Assassin's Creed having a skill tree, as it adds a sense of progression, but more importantly for me, difficulty and replayability factor. I like the idea of being able to become a master stealth assassin instead, and then having other elements of my playstyle not being as good. For example, let's say you're an excellent stealth and assassin, but you can't really deal with combat encounters properly, so that then forces you into a playstyle just using stealth. Whereas you could then have another playthrough where you are better in those combat scenarios, where it means that yes, you'll still be assassinating targets, but it also means that in those moments where you're rushed by guards, you won't feel as put off. But overall, I would say it's each to their own in that regard. With the RPG elements, one of the big ones that we saw a return of was the inventory system. Obviously, this has been around in Assassin's Creed for over a decade now. However, over the more recent releases, it became more of a, actual RPG game where you're just given tons and tons of loot. Valhalla did actually address this issue, which I think is one of the good things about Valhalla, giving you less but more meaningful loot. I'd still rather have a crafting system similar to something like Black Flag or even AC2, where you can upgrade your gear over time and see that visible change. I love how in AC2, every time I upgrade my armor, it was visible and it made you feel more badass. And I would rather have that choice in this game than necessarily choosing what type of hood I want to wear and how that affects my perks. Does the world make you feel like you're there, and does it feel bland and boring? Now, I want to talk about the world design itself, as I think the best comparison to this game is AC Origins. This game heavily reminds me of Origins, mainly due to the deserts, and I'm very well aware of that. However, the bonus factor of this game is that it's a smaller scale approach, which means that you have way more reason to use the parkour and take advantage of that, and Ubisoft definitely took advantage of that. They used it within all their promotion, and it definitely helped towards selling the idea of an old school Assassin's Creed experience. This world is definitely more of an AC title than we've seen ever since Unity. Yes, some people will say that Syndicate, obviously, because Syndicate was an old school AC game, but I felt like that game was already taking a step in the direction of making the parkour even worse due to the size difference and just how far each building was from one another, which made the scale of it a little bit off. It definitely feels more like a city within this game that you're roaming around in. However, the only criticism that I do have of it is that you don't ever feel as if you have that drive to explore it. It's similar to something like AC1, the Ezio collection, and 3 in the sense that the world is merely an obstacle for you to traverse to your next location instead of something that you actually want to explore. Now, one thing that I do also want to talk about obviously is the parkour mechanics, which are a welcome change to be brought back into the fold of feeling more like an old school AC game. It's nothing like Unity. Don't think that any of what they spoke about how Unity inspired this game to really be true in its parkour mechanics. I think yes, it was within the stealth aspects, but I don't think it was the case within the parkour. Within the parkour, they simply brought back features like hanging pots, poles, how that's new anyway, but generally speaking, most of what made this game even more of a parkour experience for old school Assassin's Creed titles is that you had more variety of the ways that you could parkour around. Unity then made that even better by giving you even more of a sense of freedom and control over your movements. This game is not like Unity in that aspect. It's more similar to something like AC2, Brotherhood, and Revelations in the sense that it is a very dumbed down parkour system. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's that awful. It's not the same as, let's say, Valhalla's. It is still as, dumbed down and weighty as Valhalla's. Sure, he's meant to be lighter, but generally it still feels clunky. But it still has variation in what you are climbing and how you're getting around, enough to make it feel as if each time you're parkouring, you're not just parkouring up the same building and all you have to do is just mundanely not care. The black box missions are back in this game, but I wouldn't say they're at the same scale as Unity, but it's definitely a nice thing to see coming back to this game and having the ability to deal with targets in different ways that actually makes them feel unique and as if they are actual targets for you to take down. A lot of the way that we would take down conventional targets in older Assassin's Creed games and the RPG games, that you'd just kind of tail them and they would be in public settings, then you would assassinate them. This time round, they feel like actual targets for you to take down. They actually live in fortified locations, or at least that's where they're based for these black box missions. It forces you to be stealthy and deal with the scenarios as they come. For example, I found it really amusing when I was taking down the first actual person you're going in to assassinate, and I ended up using eagle vision on this door, and I saw 3 massive guards on the other side of it. Blatantly a, warning to the player of, don't come in this way because you will be absolutely destroyed. So it made me completely deterred from going in that way, and I did a different thing that basically meant that you ended up using some silks. You end up taking it to another person, they kick up a fuss, and they brought your target out and distracted for you then to take down. It makes it feel way more like an actual target that you are taking down instead of some random person just walking in the alleyway who's just for some reason by himself. Let's take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Corsair and Sound ID, who sent me out the HS80 Max headset about a month and a half ago for me to test out and talk about over the next few videos. I've been really excited to partner with them because I've used Corsair headsets in the past. I also use their parts within PC builds that I've done, so that is one thing that I absolutely love, and I'm happy that I can work with them. And one thing that's amazing is that they've given me the okay, the green light to completely talk about this product in whatever manner I like. So I could talk about the negatives, I could talk about the positives. However, so far, I've not had a negative experience with it, and I've been using this headset now as my daily driver for playing games for around 2 months now. For games like Minecraft with the new Cherry Blossom updates, well, not that new, but me and my girlfriend find it new anyway. And then on top of that, playing through games like Starfield for the first time and enjoying that experience, hearing it through some premium audio and also sound calibrated audio. In terms of the actual build quality of this headset, it is really nice. In terms of the materials, absolutely great. I'm someone who's never been a big fan of gaming headsets. I've always found them too bulky, just a bit too gamery, and I feel like this is the perfect blend of just sleek and gamer aesthetics, basically. I think it just looks good. It can sit on my desk without me feeling as if it just looks ugly, as if it's got 2 turbochargers on the side. This just looks nice. It does the job really well, and also it's really comfy for both your ears and your head. Something that I haven't spoken about on this channel at all, and I didn't mention in my first video talking about it, which I probably should have because it makes my point better, is that I have hearing sensitivity issues, in the sense of my hearing is just a bit sensitive. When I hear loud noises, it isn't particularly great, especially if it's, let's say, a knife going on a plate or plates crashing together. That absolutely ends up making my day worse. And one thing is in games as well. When I get flashbanged in CSGO, it's awful for me. When I'm cracking shields in Apex Legends, it's awful for me. I hate the audio, it's just a bit too loud, and for me, that's ruined a lot of the experience and put me off playing many of these games. However, Sound ID are working with Corsair on this headset and have brought their audio enhancer with them, and with that, it basically means that you can now have a good gaming experience, a great audio experience, whilst wearing an amazing quality headset. And when I talk about the sound calibration, what you're going to see on the screen now is my results, and basically what this shows is that both of my ears are hypersensitive, or at least fairly sensitive, to very high-pitched noises and certain frequencies. So for things like doors creaking in games, flashbangs going off, or just generally overly loud sounds for a lot of games that are just used to make an impact, it can be pretty uncomfortable for me when I'm playing the game. And for others out there, you might find the same thing, or you might find that you're in the opposite direction, where you might need audio enhancement to make it at least a little bit louder for you. With this, it basically means that you can have a tailored gaming experience that works for you and gives you something of value. It allows you to actually have a headset that is, one, great quality as I said, and also the audio experience is tailored to you to make that experience as good as it possibly can be. So to sum up, if you want a great audio experience within the package of a great quality build, a great headset, great comfort, great audio experience, and as well a great mic, all of that put into one is the HS80 Max. I'd 100% recommend using it. It is the first proper sponsor I've had on this channel, and I've been very specific with who I want to work with on this channel. So it is something that I personally really enjoy using. I hope you guys enjoy using it as well. If you want to check it out, it will be linked down below if you are interested. Make sure to go check it out. And they've helped me sponsor today's video, which basically means that I can improve the quality with the likes of the editing experience and the storytelling experience. So if that does interest you, please make sure to go support Corsair and Sound ID with that link down below. And thank you again to both companies for sponsoring today's video. One topic that was brought up by a viewer called Kiwi in my Discord. If you are interested, make sure to come join the Discord, as I'll just talk about different things in regards to future videos, so you can have your input brought in there. But what he talked about was this idea of how the game is not being brought onto Steam and how that might affect the sales and general popularity. Now, a personal theory of mine that I don't necessarily wholeheartedly believe, but I wouldn't honestly be surprised if Ubisoft had done this on purpose to handicap the performance of this game. That way, they can basically turn around and say the old AC games are dead, and this has proven it. And also, because they've done a deal with Epic, it means that they've got their money up front for the development. However, I think it's more likely that this game is being made for the people who like the old school games, which means that most of them probably have Uplay, as if you own a Ubisoft game, you're forced into downloading it anyway. And if you were already interested in playing this game because it's having similarities to the old school games, then you're more likely to already go out of your way to play it anyway, and not find the lack of it being on your preferred platform an issue. Now, will this game pull people back into the franchise? I personally don't think it will. I don't think it's the saviour of this franchise or the one that we needed. However, I do think it will bring a lot of old fans back into the fray, but I don't think they'll necessarily stick along for the ride. They'll come back, and they will definitely play this game and probably find themselves enjoying it to a degree. I think a lot of people are also very disenfranchised from Ubisoft's, treatment of the fans and how they dealt with the last load of releases, and how basically Ubisoft pushed them away in the sake of gaining mass market money. And this is kind of one of the bigger downsides of this game, is that if this game doesn't perform well, then Ubisoft will never make these games again. But if this game performs well, then we'll probably get this game every now and again. But that requires a lot of people to turn around and give the game a chance if they are RPG only fans, but also give the game a chance if they were previously railed by Ubisoft in what they were actually expecting from an Assassin's Creed experience, but then walking into Valhalla and getting none of it. So I don't think this game will save the franchise from the RPG only trend, but I do think that it'll bring a lot more people back to the franchise, even if it's just for this one release. As I said though, this video is just my first thoughts on the game. If you have any comments or questions about my experience so far, let me know down below and I'll happily answer them anyway. If you do want to join the Discord, make sure to come do so. A lot more of a nicer place than your normal comment section, so if you want to check it out, make sure to go do so. That'll be down in the link down below in the description. And if you want to support the channel any further, there is a Patreon down below where you can get early access to videos like this and future discussions around things like how AI might affect future games and refund policies around them as well. So make sure to check out the Patreon if you are interested in supporting the channel. And with that all being said, hopefully you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and do subscribe for more content like this. My next honest thoughts video, so the first, take on my thoughts from a game, will be Spider-Man 2. Outside of that, there won't be any more for this year, as I've got a lot more to focus on for December for you guys when it comes to loads more content to come. So if you guys did enjoy this one, make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit a like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.